I think the biggest problem, I won't even say it's a problem, but like the biggest deterrent or the biggest um, motivator for these kind of conversations, I think that's a better way to word it, is the fact that there are people who have lowered their own standards. There are people who have chosen to put up with things that really they don't want to. And so they are harboring resentment for their decision when you didn't have to choose that, number one. I understand there could have been issues with self esteem, issues, daddy issues, mommy issues, issues with upbringing that caused you to, ultimately put yourself aside and not think of yourself first or become a people pleaser or a combination of those two things and other things. But I think what is a motivator for people when they push these ideals on others is at the end of the day, they are unhappy with their choice on a primal level, but they'll never admit it because of pride and ego. But it's like, well, it's one of those things where it's just like when you talk about like child rearing and people be like, oh well, I got beat and I turned out fine, that those kind of things, it's, I feel like it's coming from that same kind of place. So it's like they have a resentment for their choice, but because of ego they will stay in that situation or environment. And it's like when they come across somebody who is not willing to, like, I'm not, when they come across somebody who's not willing to put themselves second in order to please others, then all of a sudden it's like, well, how dare you feel like, and it's almost like people have this idea that you think you're better than them, and that's not the case. It's just I really care about myself, um, and I've done a lot of work in that realm. So it's like, how dare you feel as though, like, what makes you feel like you more or less are better, and what makes you feel like you have the right or the audacity to be like, oh, I'm not compromising, or oh, I'm not putting up with XYZ. And I think that there is a special, it's it's different for women versus men because of society and how they push women, how society pushes women um, to self-sacrifice and accept nonsense. So it's like, how dare you come along and be like, oh, I'm not doing that. I'm not accepting that. I want better for myself. Because when you do that and when you say, hey, I want better for myself, and you center yourself and your own, both mentally and emotionally and physically, and all things that encompass your well-being, it makes those who didn't make that same choice sometimes take a step back and reevaluate. And I have had deeper conversations with people who are in this spot, because a couple times, because they were like, oh, well, for example, things that I post on social media, they'll be like, oh, well, seeing your post or seeing the things that you say or do, or how you have these expectations for yourself or these non negotiables or whatever, seeing how your bar is right here, it made me. I had two people say that and this was never my intention, but they were like, oh, well, I ended my relationship because they saw how much I was willing to not go, how much I was willing to just focus on me, focus on my child, and put everything first, and how it has panned out well for me. But it's like, it forces people who may have compromised in the past. And of course, every relationship, sometimes there is compromise. I won't deny that. Like, everything that I say is not always going to go. I fully understand that. I'm not saying that I have to be like, I have to final say for every single thing. That's not it. But what is it is that seeing somebody who, like, steadfastly puts themselves first and prioritizes their well-being, it can make somebody who didn't do that in the past or is currently not doing that reevaluate where they are. Um, so it's a lot more deeper than that, but I think essentially that is the gist of it. And I think that sometimes when you are a person, especially a woman who loves themselves out loud and who proudly does not tolerate nonsense, especially nonsense from men, it can be triggering to people. So